Welcome to Healing Your Families. We're following our theme of nurturing our children. And today we're asking the question, when do you begin to nurture your baby? I'm excited to introduce our guest today. She is well qualified to answer this question. Her name is Debbie Gordon, and she's a nurse, a wellness advocate, and she knows a lot about babies and childbirth. Debbie, welcome.
Welcome. Thank you. Thank you. I'm grateful to be here, Emma Lou. Thank you
And,
for asking me.
and I didn't even get a chance to list all of the titles and things, your your credentials and accreditations. So tell us more about it. And wellness advocate. I'd like that. Tell us how you became a wellness advocate.
Oh, very good news. Well, you know what? I grew up as the seventh child of 13 on a little farm in Casper, Wyoming. And as the seventh child of 13, I always had a baby in my arms. And so at a very young age, when I was 11 years old, I wanted to be a nurse and I wanted to work with mothers and babies. And so over the course of my lifetime, I actually had a lot of opportunities to refine what kind of nurse I wanted to be. And with my own health issues, my own challenges, and then with my mother nearly dying of Guillain-Barré syndrome. So I had a lot of opportunities to define what I wanted to be like. And so I went to nursing school after high school. I actually was hired as a labor and delivery nurse, as a graduate nurse, which I was told never happens. And I really knew that God was in the details of my life. And I was really blessed to be geared towards where I needed to go. And so I started working as a labor and delivery nurse in 1985. And I loved it. It was my passion. I worked in Wyoming for 3 years before I married my husband and moved to Utah. And in Wyoming, I saw 3 epidurals in 3 years. And when an epidural was placed in Wyoming, and remember, this was the mid 80s, when that was placed, the anesthesiologist had to be right by the bedside of the patient because it upped the risk factor significantly. And then I moved to Utah, and I felt like I had moved to the epidural capital of the world. And I don't mean to offend in any way, but we had upwards of 98, probably 99% induction epidural rate. And I had never seen so many risk factors, so many complications of birthing, so many difficulties with bonding, so many difficulties with breastfeeding. I had just not experienced that to date in my experience in Wyoming, where we did everything naturally. It was all natural childbirth for the most part. And so I wondered, what in the heck are you people doing with birthing? And so I was on a course to see what was going on and what could we change. And I got involved really early on. I actually was the preceptor of all the new hires at LDS Hospital for the first 5 years that I was there. And then I transferred to Altaview Hospital. So I worked for Intermountain Healthcare after moving to Utah for 23 years. And I really did love my career. I really did love what I did. I was passionate about it. And it didn't really matter the fact that I climbed the career ladder really quickly, because when I got married, we actually struggled immensely to get our family here. We had a couple of miscarriages early on in our marriage. Then we went through a lot of fertility issues. I was diagnosed in 1991 with PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome. And back then in 1991, they had no idea how that altered the course of our wellness. And now, 40 years later, almost 35 years later, I'm living that again, and dealing with some issues with my blood sugar, where I've managed it all with diet up to this point. So anyway, backtrack just a little bit. As I moved into Utah and experienced that, what in the heck are you people doing with birthing? I really felt like there was a spiritual disconnect with our creation, with our creator, and the fact that as women, we are made to have children. We are made to birth these children. And yes, there are those circumstances that are very, very few and far between, where they're not able to have children. Or with me, I struggled with fertility. That seems to be rampant right now. And so I struggled with fertility. We went through all kinds of fertility treatment for about 5 years, all the medications, the injections, the interventions, the intrauterine inseminations, all the whatever. We did not do, we did not do IVF, but we did everything up to that point, and not once did I conceive. And so we ended up adopting a couple of boys. And between the adoptions, they were 3.5 years apart. I had a couple more miscarriages after the first one, a couple more miscarriages after the second one. And then on my 7th pregnancy, I actually was able to carry that full term. But I started bleeding like clockwork at 8 weeks, went into my fertility doctor, and I had a fibroid tumor that was bleeding. The baby was fine, which was the first time that I heard that word or that phrase, the baby was fine. And so that was hopeful. And then I started bleeding again at 13 weeks. And that time he said, Debbie, you're out of my realm. We need to get you to perinatology. So to make a long story short, with that first pregnancy, and I did carry Matthew to full term, I never really eased up on that mindset of being high risk. And so for you mamas that consider yourself high risk, I want to reframe that phrase because it did not serve me well, and it did not serve my outcome well. And so I want to help you reframe that just a little bit. And in the doing of that, led me into becoming a wellness advocate. And I've worked with a lot of women with traumatic births and wanting to have a different experience and wanting to really step into that philosophy that birthing is a normal, natural, physiological process. Well, when I got married and moved to Utah, I actually I have all these years, attended all the perinatal nursing conferences. And one of the very first conferences I attended in Utah, we had a speaker that spoke about hypnobirthing. And I wrote in that syllabus at that time, at that conference, and I don't know where my syllabus is to this date, but I did find it after Matthew's birth. And I had written in my syllabus, I will teach this one day. And so as I was pregnant with Matthew and going through some difficulties and some challenges and some high risk stuff, I got caught in that mindset of high risk. And I never once during that pregnancy thought about, considered, even brought to mind the idea of hypnobirthing. Didn't even cross my mind one time until after I birthed Matthew. Now, my labor with Matthew, it started right after midnight. My membranes released with a gush. And so I labored for 14.5 hours before he was in my arms. And I worked really hard at it. I was planning a natural birth. I wanted a natural birth. I did not want an epidural. And the reason I didn't want an epidural was twofold. First of all, I saw the ramifications of what that meant in the afterbirth experience for my clients. And I also had an elevator fall. I was involved in an elevator fall in 1991 at LDS Hospital, and I ended up with a back fusion in 1993. And so my level of my back fusion was right about the same level as they would use to place an epidural. So I was not a good candidate for an epidural. And I had almost lost the use of my legs. And so I didn't want that numbness in my legs. I was really somewhat fearful of that numbness in my legs. And so I didn't want an epidural. I was really honed in on having a natural childbirth, an unmedicated birth. And so as I neared the end of my pregnancy, long about 33 weeks pregnant, one of my nursing colleagues asked me if I had considered hiring a doula. Well, at that point in my career, I had worked with childbearing women for 17 years prior to that point. And so that tells you a little bit too. I was an advanced maternal age mother. I'm having children in my later years, but I thought I knew what I needed to know to birth my children unmedicated and naturally. And the reality is that I did. But as I birthed Matthew, I worked really hard at it. And now I tell my hypnobirthing couples, you can either work hard at labor or you can work hard at relaxing and really allow your birthing body to do its normal, natural, physiological job, which is, and you only have a uterus. Well, there's more than one reason, but a big reason why you have a uterus is for birthing. That's its job. But it's its normal, natural, physiological job. And so now as a hypnobirthing practitioner, I really guide couples in that idea of work at relaxing, work at your breathing techniques, work at your relaxation techniques, work at letting go, work at your visualization in your mind's eye, work at succumbing or following the leads of a hypnosis script, a self-hypnosis script, but work at relaxing. Don't just struggle through each and every contraction. In hypnobirthing, we change the language, and it's a whole lot more softer and conducive to relaxing and letting go and yielding and becoming loose and limp, or becoming more like a rag doll, whatever you want to phrase, whatever phrase you want to use. We really do encourage that with hypnobirthing so that your body can do its natural, normal physiological job. And hypnobirthing is really all about instinctive birthing. It's about incorporating relaxation techniques, including the self-hypnosis that I just mentioned, the visualization, the breathing techniques. It's really about trusting that you were made to do this. It's really about trusting and believing in your creation and in your creator, that you have everything you need to birth your baby. And even with regards to, I get asked all the time, the childbirth is painful. Well, if that's our mindset, that's what we're going to get. But when we actually relax into it and let our birthing body do its job, the birthing muscles are no different than any other paired muscle group in our body. Our biceps is paired with our triceps, our quads are paired with our hamstrings. And when one muscle group is working, the other one should be relaxing. And the same is true with hypnobirthing. When we're talking about the uterine muscles, the longitudinal muscles, which are like long, strong fingers reaching down to draw the circular muscles up over the baby's head like a turtleneck sweater, those two muscle groups paired, when one is working, the other should be relaxing. And so when those longitudinal muscles are doing their work of the contraction, or in hypnobirthing, we change that to surge or wave. When you're having that motion of drawing those circular muscles up over the baby's head, the circular muscles should be relaxed and just yielding and coming up over the baby's head as those longitudinal muscles do their work. But when the problem comes, when fear enters the picture. And so, boy, there's a lot we cover in hypnobirthing, but let me tell you, when fear enters the picture, it messes everything up. It throws us into fight or flight. The blood is shunted to those muscles that we use for fight or flight. And that does not include the birthing muscles. And so when you deprive the uterine muscle of blood and oxygen, you're going to have pain. And furthermore, the fear that the mother's holding, she will hold on to her baby at all cost. And so she does not let go. She does not yield. She does not surrender. She does not allow that birthing body to do its job, its normal natural physiology. And we have muscle groups working in opposition. So that's going to bring pain. And so the idea of pain in childbirth is really a cultural based thing. And it's also adding fear to the picture. And so I prepare couples for a calm, gentle, more comfortable birth with hypnobirthing techniques and philosophy to help them recognize the gift that they have in this body of theirs. Their creation is magnificent. And not only their creation of their birthing body, but also the fact that the baby brings to the picture. He or she is very much an active participant. Their skull bones are not fused. The hormones of pregnancy help loosen all the joints, the ligaments, the cartilage, the tendons. I mean, there's so much built into our anatomy and physiology that allow women to literally have a comfortable birth. And it's not meant, birthing is not meant to be painful and miserable. And so, my work as a labor and delivery nurse, my work, then that led me into being a doula. And part of that was what we were doing in the hospital setting. I'm not a real fan of the policies and procedures, and I helped write some of them. And I tried to undo a lot of those policies and procedures while I was in the hospital setting to actually recognize that women need to be supported in birthing in their own way. For instance, in my childbirth classes, I would actually teach birth plans. And the nurses and doctors did not like me doing that. And I had to explain again and again and again that birth plans are a communication tool. Birth plans help let us know what this individual wants in her birthing experience. And our job as a birthing team then is to wrap our mind and our efforts and our actions and our words and everything we do around creating for this mother her ideal birthing circumstance and experience. And when we do that, she is calm. she feels safe and secure and supported, and she can do her birthing job well. But when we intervene and we start with the hospital policies and procedures, even with the idea of asking a lot of questions when a woman comes to labor and delivery. Now, understand that when you've seen your OBGYN throughout your pregnancy, long about 36 to 38 weeks, they send your medical records to the birthing facility where you're going to give birth. But that birthing team at the hospital are strangers to you. They don't know you. And so they will ask you a bunch of intake questions when you arrive at the hospital setting that really take a laboring mother out of her relaxation or her mammalian brain and put her into her neocortex, her frontal brain, where she has to think about the answers to these questions. And she cannot relax and let go and think at the same time. She has to relinquish the answering of those questions to her birthing companion in order to stay in that relaxed zone. So the idea that, first of all, birth is not a medical event, yet most births do still happen in the hospital setting. We're surrounded by a bunch of strangers that don't know us, that ask us a barrage of questions that take us out of our relaxation brain, and it's really not a good plan. And so we have to change that in the hospital setting. And the only way we're going to change it is through the consumer. You as the consumer have a much greater say in creating change in the birthing situation or the birthing arena than we as nurses. I promise you that you have a much greater say. And so speaking up and asking the question.
This is so true. This is so true. I just wanted to interject that when you touched on fear, for many women, the greatest fear is the unknown. They don't know what to expect. I remember as a teenager being told that childbirth was the most severe pain you would ever experience. And that's a lie. There are a lot of things that hurt worse than childbirth. My mother, when her mother died when she was young, and she asked an older sister, tell me about childbirth. What can I expect? And the only thing her sister would tell her was, you will pray to die. And if that's the only childbirth preparation a woman has, yes, it's going to be painful. She's going to be terrified. It's going to be the worst experience of her life. To me, I love what you're doing with hypnobirthing, just understanding how the body works and understanding her muscles, her uterine muscles, how they're working together. I love what you do with hypnobirthing totally, and that communication with the birthing facility. You're not going to do this every day. Why not arrange it to be, look at what people do at a gender reveal or a proposal. Why not make this day exactly to your liking?
Yep, I really encourage couples, plan at least as much for your birth. Prepare and plan at least as much as for your birth as you do for your wedding, right? Because it's a day you will never forget, and it's a very important day for you and for your baby. And so don't go into that, oh, I'm not going to think about it, I'm not going to do anything for it because it's too scary. If you get caught in that mindset, you will not have a beautiful birth, I promise. And birth is meant to be magnificent.
It is. It truly is. It truly is meant to be a beautiful experience. So let's get to that question. When do you begin nurturing your baby?
You know what? We can say as soon as you're pregnant, but I'm going to bring in a little caveat there, because, all of our upbringing, we bring to the table a bunch of stuff, and I call it emotional baggage. And that's not necessarily a delightful term, but all of that emotional baggage weighs heavily on our mindset. And so it's an evolution, I guess. You know what? I mean, we could say, yeah, I work with people who struggle with fertility. And so we do a lot of cleansing to cleanse the toxins from their body before they ever conceive. And that's part of what I do as a wellness advocate. So we cleanse the toxins from the body so we don't bring that to the pregnancy. And the same is true as we're cleansing physically. Believe it or not, we're also going to be cleansing emotionally. And the more we can get rid of that baggage, the less it encumbers us in pregnancy and childbirth. But once we know we're pregnant, that's a really great time to start connecting with this baby. All too often, we're caught up in and the toxicity brings about a whole lot more morning sickness than is needful. Yes, hormones of pregnancy can bring that on, but you and I all know somebody that wasn't sick during pregnancy. What's the difference between somebody who is really sick during pregnancy and somebody who is not? And so we do have to take a look at that toxicity factor. So, but the emotional stuff that we carry on. I'm working with some couples right now, both of which have some really difficult family upbringing issues. And we've got to move through that before she ever goes into labor, or it's going to really encumber her labor and prolong it and make it more uncomfortable because of the fear that she brought to the table. In fact, one of the books I love to read from in my hypnobirthing classes is Grantley Dick Reed's book, Childbirth Without Fear. And he asks the question, is it the nature of the labor that bring the emotions, or vice versa? Is it the emotions that the mother brings to the labor that bring on the experience of labor? And so it's a really poignant question and something to really ponder. But as soon as we find out we're pregnant, that's a really great time to start bonding with our baby. And how would we do that? There's lots of ways we would do that. When people come to my hypnobirthing classes, our class number 2 really focuses on prenatal bonding. And we talk about things like rubbing your belly, talking to your baby, singing to your baby. Even the music you listen to day in and day out, your baby will become aware of that. Long about the 4th and 5th month of gestation, your baby can hear, and they can hear, and they know what's going on around them. And they know that emotionally too. If a mother's under a lot of high stress, she's going to be producing stressor hormones. Those stressor hormones cross the placenta, and then we have a baby that's hypervigilant in reaction time, basically developing a brainstem, a hyperdeveloped brainstem instead of a hyperdeveloped forebrain. And so the stress that the mother feels is very much transferred to the baby. And so just understanding that concept and the fact that whatever we do, whatever we eat, whatever we think about all day long, whatever emotions we're feeling, our baby's experiencing, taking time to then just kind of sort of wrap your arms around that baby from the outside, right? And saying, wow, I know you felt that. We might be in a near accident on the freeway. And we, it raises our blood pressure, it throws us into fight or flight, it raises our respiratory rate. We feel all uptight and tense and scared and worried, and our baby feels that. And so when we can stop our world for a moment and say, wow, I know you felt that, and just take a nice deep breath and bring ourselves back to a state of calmness and just wrap your arms around that baby, right?
To
And
soothe and comfort the baby,
yeah,
even before they're born.
before they're born. And we can do journaling. We can keep track of our baby's growth. What can we expect? I love watching that. The miracle of conception, the miracle of pregnancy, the miracle of birth. I love tuning into stuff like that, as long as it doesn't cause fear. The moment it causes fear, we need to change what we're looking at and what we're reading, right? But we really need to just do whatever we can to connect with the baby and not think, for instance, we have a lot of women when they're pregnant that think they're so fat. I remember my sister calling me, and she was pregnant with twins, and she actually said to me, how soon before I'm going to look and feel like a whale? And I was like, holy Hannah, sister, that's the wrong idea. You are growing 2 babies. And so with that, we want those babies to be healthy and strong. We want them to grow. And that's going to take enlargement of our abdomen. And furthermore, the moment we get pregnant, a whole bunch of things happen without our conscious participation that we have no say in. For instance, the hormones of pregnancy, one of the first signs of pregnancy is that we have tender breasts. And I think it's so fascinating that 9 months before we need our breast to produce breast milk, it's already doing that. It's already gearing up for that purpose 9 months before we need it. And so it's just really interesting to me that breast tenderness is one of the first signs of pregnancy, and we don't even need them yet. And then we have the darkening of the areola. That's a target for the baby to find their way to the breast. And so the hormones of pregnancy cause all these things to happen that we are not even consciously participating in. It just happens because the sperm hit the egg. And so, the fact that pregnancy is a normal, natural, physiological experience is a beautiful concept. And then with regards to pain, the endorphins in our body, the same cocktail of hormones that is engaged in the lovemaking experience is the very same cocktail of hormones involved in childbirth. And so when we can activate, when we can engage that endorphin oxytocin cycle, that's what we want to do. And when we are relaxed and calm, endorphins are produced. When we're feeling safe and secure and at ease and at peace with the world, endorphins are produced. And coupled with endorphins come that oxytocin, that love hormone. And that's the hormone of letdown, the hormone of letting go, turning over to God, of surrendering, of it's the letdown, it's the ejaculation reflex, it's the orgasmic reflex, it's the letdown of breast milk reflex. The oxytocin is a really critical hormone involved in the childbirth experience, and we want to engage that endorphins flow. The endorphins are 200 times more potent than any narcotic we can give you in labor and childbirth. And so we need to learn how to activate that. And I
no
teach
side effects, no risk factors.
no side effects, no risk factors. And when we actually use pain management in childbirth, we actually shush that endorphin response. And the same is true with the oxytocin response. If we do an induction with Pitocin or any of your hormone induction methods, we actually shush that oxytocin production. And that does not, the synthetic drugs do not cross the blood-brain barrier. They do not have the same effect. Pitocin does not help us produce endorphins like oxytocin does. And so we really shush the body's natural mechanisms, and that translates into our afterbirth experience. And so we don't have those endorphins flowing. We usually need more pain management after birth. It affects the oxytocin release, which is also the bonding hormone. There's a lot of factors, also the breastfeeding release hormone, the breastfeeding letdown. So there's a lot of factors when we manipulate and manage birth. There's a lot of ramifications of that. And so trusting in our creation, trusting in our creator that we really do have everything we need is kind of my message to the world. And so my tagline is empowering confident mothers to trust in their creation and in their creator. And that's my tagline. And if you have that belief, then come work with me. Together we can create something really, truly magnificent.
Well, it sounds like you could not only you would be able to help couples not only with pregnant couples preparing for the birth, but infertile couples struggling with infertility. I just love the wide range of wellness advocate. You are well.
Yeah.
That title fits you well. So I love it. I love it. So how do people contact you?
Well, my website, you can go to my website, and it's thedebbygordon.com, Debbie Gordon, DebbieGordon.com, thedebbygordon.com. You can actually schedule with me a chat. We can talk, and that's what I do as a wellness advocate and as a hypnobirthing practitioner, as a doula. I always want to chat and make sure we're a right fit, right? So I want to kind of meet with you over Zoom is how I do that most often. Or you can come to my home. I live in Draper, Utah, but I can meet with you over Zoom, and we can talk about your specific needs and concerns. And I do this all day, every day, and I use natural solutions. And that's another piece of my wellness advocacy. My body was not a prime candidate for Western medicine. Let me just say it like that. I do not do medications well at all. So I have always used herbs and homeopathy and essential oils. Is what I really hone in on now, because I find they're faster in their efficacy. They're faster in their therapeutic consistency. And so I can guide you with natural solutions to help turn around some of those health concerns that you're struggling with, and help you to then raise your little ones and your babies with natural solutions. I find that when a mother has a birth experience that boosts her confidence level, instead of stripping her of her confidence level, she walks into motherhood confident. So when I say empowering confident mothers, how we give birth matters a big deal. It changes us forever. And so if we are not supported, if we are told what to do throughout our labor and birthing experience, and even throughout our pregnancy, if we are told what to do, we go into parenthood waiting for that second voice to tell us what to do. And we lose contact with that intuitive gift that we are given as parents. And so I help women and mothers and fathers step back into that gift of that intuitive parenting, of trusting. And I do this as I guide them with their wellness concerns. I help them listen to their body and help their body to help them recognize what their body is telling them. The language of the body is truly amazing. And it really does tell us. And when we take medications that shush the symptom, we're basically saying to the body, shut up, I don't want to hear from you. Shh, shh, shh. Don't talk to me that way. And so it can't talk to us. And so we have to let go of that concept that we take a pill or a remedy for every symptom that comes up in our life. That shushes the body's language, and we got to get away from that. And so, as a wellness advocate, I help mothers step into that intuitive voice again, so
And
they can listen for the needs of their children.
it sounds like it has a lot to do with connecting with our bodies, that mind and body connection. We've lost that in our modern world. You're right. We're not, pain is a signal. It's telling us here's something that needs to be addressed. So we're just shushing the pain rather than saying, okay, what do I need to adjust? What do I need to change?
That's correct.
I think that's huge.
Yeah. So you can contact me on my website, thedebbiegordon.com. You're welcome to text me or leave a voicemail. My phone number is 801-913-2633. I'm happy to give that out, 801-913-2633. If I don't know your number, I'm probably not going to pick up. And so send me a text first and introduce yourself to me on the text and what you'd like to talk to me about. I'll call you back, or leave me a voicemail with your phone number and I'll call you back. Okay.
And I love the services you offer, and that consultation call is totally free, right?
Totally
No
free.
obligation. You're just,
Obligation.
I can tell you love helping people,
I
especially
really do.
parents.
I really do. And,
Debbie,
and I recognize that, Emmylou, that I'm not the best fit for everyone.
uh-huh.
And so I honor the idea that a mother searching for a doula, for instance, or a childbirth educator might actually interview 3 or 4 other hypnobirthing practitioners or other doulas to find their ideal fit. And I'm totally supportive of that. I remember when I hired my first doula, that's a story in and of itself. But I mentioned that when I was 33 weeks, my nursing colleague said, have you considered a doula? And I was like, I've been doing this for 17 years. What do I need a doula for? Well, then when I re-emphasized to my OBGYN that I was not going to have an epidural, he asked me, have you considered a doula? And I was like, wow, why do I need a doula? And then I was at my aunt's home, and she's also a nurse. She's not a labor and delivery nurse, but she's a nurse. And at the time that I was there, it was 20 years ago, this boy's 20 years old. At the time that I was there, her nursing friend that was a labor and delivery nurse was there. And Virginia said, have you considered a doula? And she went even call Claire Stanley. She goes, I know exactly who you need to work with. And she knew my story. She knew my background story of my struggle to get my babies here. And so she actually made a phone call to Claire Stanley, left her my phone number and said, call Debbie back. And Claire did call me back. So we interviewed Claire as a doula. And she recognized that she was also not the most ideal doula for everyone. And she wanted us to think about it. Well, my husband and I left her home, drove around the block, drove right back and hired her on the spot. Because I connected so very well with her and knew that her expertise was exactly what we wanted. And our births were magnificent. We went on to have 3 biological children. Claire was our doula for 2 births. The last birth, my youngest child was born emergency cesarean at 32 weeks. That was not my plan, but I had a placental abruption, and Claire was not involved in that birth yet, but she became involved. And boy, did she give me the what I'm going to say, the support that I needed in that difficult preterm emergency cesarean birth. And so I highly recommend, as a labor and delivery nurse of many years before I had my own children, I hired a doula, and it was the best thing I ever did, but it wasn't without prompt of those around me that knew my history. And so
Reminders.
yeah. So for all
You
of you
know,
ladies.
and I just want to emphasize this part of, we need to take charge of our own health and wellness. And I remember my first baby, innocent young thing. I was just doing whatever the doctor said. And over time, I learned to interview that birth attendant, to interview and ask questions, and don't blindly follow. Like you said, a prescription that may work for most people may not work for you. If you don't, just take charge and know that you have options.
I love that. And Emily, that pretty much describes what I do as a wellness advocate. I help people take charge of their wellness.
Excellent. Excellent. Debbie, thank you so much for joining us. I
Welcome.
love what you do, and your contact information will be in the show notes. So I urge, if you're struggling with infertility, preparing for that precious little one to join your family, start nurturing your baby right away and contact Debbie. Find out how she can help and support you in this amazing journey.
I would love to help.
Join us again next week at the same time. Until then, remember to love yourself and love your families. Let's make the world a better place by strengthening families. This is Emily Penrod, and you can reach me at healingyourfamilies.com.